Hello everybody and welcome back to Gardens and Crystals with me, Wesley, and today I have another update video for you because I am so pleased about the outcome of the pruning back and propagating of this wonderful plant I have next to me here. This is my Syngonium podophyllum Trileaf Wonder, and I did a video 5 months ago now. So that was January 2021, at the end of January 2021, where I pruned this plant that had grown over 1 meter tall, a couple of meters maybe, and it became leggy all the way up the stem and had big, beautiful leaves at the top. I went in and pruned that plant right back. I repotted the mother root balls. There were 3, I think, and I put them into this terracotta pot. New soil, lots of bark around the top, and this plant had nothing, no leaves, just the stalk, the stem left. And I put it in my Mars Hydro grow tent where I have a lovely, powerful TS1000 LED white spectrum grow light, left it in there. It's been in there for the last 5 months, and look at the result. This plant has bounced back, flushed out again, and has grown to about, well, it must be about 50 centimeters tall now, and even more bushy. And this was exactly the effect I was looking for when I made that video and decided to go in and prune this plant right back and give it a new, fresh start. The plant was getting leggy because my indoor terrace garden, as you can see around me here, isn't bright enough for a lot of plants, I found out. So they either grow leggy because they're reaching up and they're trying to search for the light. And I think this was happening with this plant, but also this is a vining plant, so they do vine out anyway, naturally, and as they grow up, their leaves get bigger and more beautiful, and the leaves will change shape as well, the bigger they get. So if you want to have this kind of effect on your Syngonium plants that are starting to vine, you will at some point have to go in and prune back, propagate them, and start again. So the main mother balls, I just put straight back into the soil. They flushed out all of this growth, look absolutely beautiful. And I've also planted in the bottom around here some of my water propagations that I did at the same time. I had a lot of stems. I put some of those water propagations, once they flushed out roots, directly in the soil here around the mother plant stems, and they are looking beautiful, as you can see down here, and flushing out in amongst the rest of the plant. So this was a great success. Now, I'm not saying that everything survived. I did put some of the water propagation cuttings around in the bottom of this pot, and they have died back, and some of them have died back, but I know the roots are still fine because I can see around the back and so forth that there are new leaves starting to flush out where I pruned everything back that wasn't looking so good. So even though the top part might look like it's yellowing out or dying back, something like that, don't worry about pulling out the roots in the beginning because the roots can still be working underground where you can't see it and they can flush out. So that is definitely what's happening here. This plant has started to produce some lovely aerial roots. It has some longer aerial roots growing on it. And there is just so much growth and so many leaves coming out in the middle of this plant. And I'm thinking, okay, now this plant is big enough to be taken out of my Mars Hydro grow tent and left to carry on growing outside. But I'm really afraid of doing that at the same time because it's been doing so well in that environment there. It's very warm, it's very bright, and the plant gets watered through, and then when I'm not here it might have a period where it's not that wet, so that's perfect for the plant. It does like to dry a little bit in between, preferably not too much, but it doesn't want to be bogged down in water either, but that's why I put it in a terracotta pot and it is loving it. So if I take it out, I'm afraid that the drastic drop in light is going to cause this plant to start not performing as good as it is now and not be as bushy as it is now. And another result will be that it will start legging out and then either flop over or it's going to have a stake to hold it up. Now, I don't want to let this plant grow up and up and up and leg out again. This time I'm going to keep pruning the top to try and keep the shape. But I do want the stems to stay strong and hardy and keep themselves up like this plant is right now. This is perfect the way it's looking now. So it's really, I'm a little bit afraid of taking it out of the grow tent because I'm so happy about this result. And the soil, as I showed you in that video, was a gardening mix. I've mixed it with sand. I put biochar in there, I think. I'm not sure if I put lacquer balls. It looks like there are some lacquer balls, but I can't remember. And I have covered the top with bark. And the whole combination is keeping this plant very happy. So apart from that, I haven't done anything special with the plant at all. And these cuttings, they grow roots very quickly if they're in a bright condition and have fresh water. Then they will flush out roots quite quickly and then you can repot them. I would suggest, and this is something I think I'm going to be doing a lot more in the future now with cuttings, is because I have the Mars hydro grow tent and I have an environment that's bright and warm, I don't have to do water propagations. And I found that water propagations are fine in the beginning and the plants flush out lovely roots, but when you transfer them from the waters to the soil, a lot of plants have an awful hard time adjusting to the soil conditions, and they start to yellow out, they start to defoliate, and they start to rot, and they start to fade away. So I think the best way, if possible, is always to propagate in soil. Plants that can be propagated in soil, I would suggest that that is the way to go. Just make sure that you keep the soil moist, make sure the plant is getting a lot of bright light, indirect light for many plants. Some plants you can give direct light with cover kind of thing, but soil propagation. I've found with certain plants, even soil propagation, you can let the plants dry out in between. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about more succulent kind of plants like a jade plant, Crasula ovata, or your Dracaenas, Sansevieria kind of plants. I have them growing in terracotta pots directly in soil now when I propagate, a lot of them, and they are flushing out roots. I water them, they dry out, I water them, they dry out, and they are fine, they don't rot out that way. If you keep the soil moist with those kind of plants, the whole time when you're water propagating, they will probably rot out for you, unless they're getting the optimal amount of light, which needs to be quite a lot. Other kind of plants you can keep moist, like philodendrons or scindapsus or syngoniums and other things like that. But again, you'll have to keep a balance so that you don't oversaturate the soil, you don't leave them soggy, you make sure that you give them enough light in comparison to the moisture. It's very important to keep that balance because they're not going to work out otherwise. So I've had quite a good success rate with this plant. I had lots and lots of cuttings and most of them have done really, really well. So I just wanted to give you an update video of this plant and how it's looking now, 5 months after I went and pruned it back. So if you're having the same problem with a plant that is stretching out or defoliating or looking leggy, in and chop it back. Everywhere you have a node, you can go in and you can plant that node. And I'm sure this plant would do very well just directly in soil as cuttings from the stem because their nodes and their aerial roots are quite big and quite good. And this also goes for plants, any kind of plant that grows thick, strong, lovely aerial roots. All the philodendrons, all the monsteras, things like this, they can be propagated directly in soil. So again, I'm just talking from my experience and my microenvironment in my home, in my situation here in Sweden, and the fact that I don't have much light in my apartment. Maybe you're living somewhere that's very bright and you've got big windows and your plants have access to lovely daylight and the natural flow of the sunlight during the day and the seasons, and your plants do very well with that. But mine isn't that good. I have grow lights around, I have just normal LED lights and so forth, and I have the sun that filters in through the western facing windows we have here that ricochet off the other buildings, but not really direct light. There is a little tiny bit in the summer actually where it penetrates into the back of the room, but not for very long at all. So really think about all these things, but I really would say the number one most important thing about this is the combination of light to water, moisture on these plants. The leaves are lovely and they're getting big. The only thing I'm having a problem with all the time is thrips. This plant has also been covered with thrips. And I know there are thrips still on this plant. I've seen some crawling around as I'm talking here. I'm not gonna lie. These little creatures are very difficult to get rid of. I have been using a mixture of neem oil with dishwashing liquid and water, mixing that together, a little drop of each, shaking it up and spraying these plants. But unless you do it every single day, you are not going to get rid of thrips or anything else. I've found that there's a lot of hype about neem oil and so forth, but it's not something you can just spray once and expect your plant to be clear, or twice. You're going to have to do it for a good few weeks every single day. And I'm not here to do that every single day. So I come and spray them when I'm here, but when I'm not here for a while, I'm at my crystal cottage, I could be gone for a week or two, then the amount of thrips starts building up again, because you won't get everything, but you will help to keep the amount of insects on your plants down. So that is a big problem on this plant. And they leave streaks on the leaves, and they start leaving patches on the leaves, and then the leaves will start yellowing out, and then the leaves will eventually die off. And that is a general problem I have in my whole indoor terrace garden here. But I've started to filter out my plants now. I'm looking more and more for plants that can cope with the lower light conditions, and that means a lot of dracaenas. My Hoyas are doing fine close to the windows, my epipremnums, my Scindapsus plants, my Zamioculcas zamiofolia plants. What else do I have going on around here? Yeah, I have another philodendron there. Oh yeah, I have my Scindapsus trubii. I have other dracaena plants, and these are all doing very well in here, so I'm starting to filter out and only have the kind of plants that I really know can survive in this situation. And that means when I say filtering out, there are a lot of these exotic plants that I no longer have, or I am not keeping. They're going to other homes and so forth, because there's no point me keeping them here when they're struggling and struggling and struggling. And with that, I mean a lot of philodendrons. They don't seem to like low light conditions, as it's always said, that they can cope with. They can cope for a while, but then they will start getting smaller leaves, they will start thinning out, they will start getting leggy like everything else. So a lot of philodendrons don't cope with that, and then being watered too much, because they really will rot out very quickly. They need a minimum amount of water, but at the same time, a minimal amount of water and low light is not good for those plants, because their roots start getting weak, they start getting too dry and so forth, and that combination doesn't work either. So a lot of my philodendrons are gone, and there are some different types of epipremnum plants that have a difficult time in a lower light condition. But I found, and I just want to show you now quickly. For example, this is the epipremnum aureum enjoy, and this plant does need a lot of bright indirect light. And I've had these plants now a good few months, and I didn't know if they were going to carry on surviving well for me, but they are doing very well, and I'm very pleased, because I have them hanging up in front of my window where they're getting indirect light all day long, and they have managed to keep their white and green variegation going on. The browning on the leaves has faded out, but if these plants don't get enough light, they will start browning on the leaves very quickly for you, defoliating, yellowing, and die out. Another thing with this plant is it does not like to be repotted. So I was going to put these into one pot together, but I've decided to just leave them alone in their pots because they're doing so well for me. I've had them months now. I've found the perfect position for them. I'm not moving them around. I'm very happy with them. So they're going to stay like this. But there are a lot of these type of plants that wouldn't normally do well in my home if I tried to move them away from the window. I've tried that with these before. They haven't worked. This is the first time it's worked. Now I know what I need to do. Now I'm not going to touch them. So that was just an example of a plant that you might think could be easy just because it's an epipremnum, or a plant that's classed in the pothos group, and think that they're all easy. They are not. The light still has to be perfect for them. Another thing that I found that is very important with house plants is for many plants, it's a very good idea to make sure that you pot them into a terracotta pot, because that way, if the light conditions aren't right, when you water them, at least the water will be able to seep out in a natural steady flow rather than being retained in the pot and building up a moisture layer that will end up rotting out your plant before you know it, it's got root rot. So rather be on the safe side. If anything, it is much better that your plant dries out a little bit too much than it getting over saturated and rotting out, because those plants will be difficult for you to save unless they are a vine. Then you'll be able to go in and do propagations, but that means you're going to have to start all the way over again. If you have a lovely big plant, you won't be able to keep that big plant. You're going to have to prune it all up into small segments. But if you have a plant that has a normal root ball and it's rotted, then you're not going to be able to save that plant. So you really do need to be careful about that, and that is why terracotta is perfect. You can go in, you can water it through, and know that that water will be able to evaporate in a reasonable amount of time, so the plant is not just going to sit and rot. So with that said, there are a lot of my plants that I had before and I've done videos on that I do not have any longer. And there will be new plants coming in those plant families and genuses and so forth that I think will be able to cope with the situation in my home. I also want to thin out a little bit because of the thrips problem and so forth. There's no point having so many plants all the time, because if they're all going to get covered in thrips and mealybugs and all sorts, then it's difficult to keep control of all of this. I've found that a lot of my Hoyas are getting mealybugs on them, and it's a constant struggle as well, going in and getting the neem oil and having to do it by hand, going in and wipe off mealybugs that spread around. And that is because plants are too close together. So these bugs, they just transmit from one to the other. It's not a natural environment. There's no wind, there's no rain to wash anything off. So there aren't the natural elements to help your house plants. So if you have a lot of plants, it's very difficult to go in and go and take them all to the shower and wash them over. And if you spray them over, yes, you can spray them over, but that's not going to get hardly any of those kind of bugs off them, and especially when they're hiding under the leaves and in the crevices and so forth, when you spray them over, that's not even going to touch those insects. So it is a constant battle trying to battle all of the bugs. But one thing I had a problem with a year ago was fungus gnats. I had a hive of fungus gnats all of a sudden, and it's during the winter time that they come out mostly. This season, and even last winter, I've had hardly any fungus gnats in my indoor terrace garden. So they've kind of disappeared now. I've been using the neem oil. I've put a lot of plants in terracotta pots. I have a lot of plants now that I can water from the bottom. That helps. They've been drying out a lot more when I haven't been here. And this has helped to create undesirable living conditions for fungal gnat larvae in the soil. So that problem has really reduced. I see a fungal gnat now and again now, but I don't have hives of them, and when they swarm out all of a sudden in one go and they're all going towards the window and I see them lying along the window ledge and so forth, I had that one year. No more, that's gone. The problem I have now are thrips and mealybugs. So I'm also trying to thin out plants that get these bugs too much, and there are plants with more succulent type leaves are easier to control and clean. And some of these kind of plants, like the Sansevieria plants, none of my Sansevieria plants have had any bugs on them, none of the different types at all. So they're fantastic. So I will be collecting more different Sansevieria dracaenas. My Hoyas are fantastic, but they do get mealybugs on them. But apart from that, they're also quite good. So it's just a matter of keeping an eye on the mealybugs, then they're quite okay as well. The dracaenas, they're also quite okay. They can get thrips on them, but because they've got larger leaves, it's easier to go in and spray those plants, and they don't get bad attacks on them. The plants I've had that have had huge attacks of things on them are the plants in the Gopertia family. You will know them as Calatheas of different types, Stromanthes and Tenanthes, and all of these kind of plants. They get a lot of spider mites and so forth on them, and it spreads like wildfire. And those plants don't cope very well with the winter dark conditions compared to the summer. So I have none of those left. And I won't be getting those unless I get a lovely home one day with a lot more light and where I can keep them in an area on their own, and preferably somewhere where I'd be able to go in and spray them over and keep them really clean and nice and healthy. Anyway, I've been going on for a bit now. I just wanted to make this a quick video about my beautiful Syngonium podophyllum Trileaf Wonder that is doing absolutely wonderful for me. I just wanted to show you that the technique worked with soil propagation and the water propagations, and you don't have to worry about going in and pruning this plant back if it's getting leggy. Just go in and do it and you will get this result. Just make sure you've got bright light, moisture, and make sure that the light is coming from the top of the plant to make it stretch up like this one is, because otherwise your plant will stretch forward or it will stretch down or to the side or wherever the light source is coming from. The light needs to be at the top, and that's why I'm so afraid of taking this plant out and it may be not performing as well now, because it's been doing so well with the beautiful Mars Hydro TS1000 LED white spectrum grow light above it that has kept it very happy. So if you have any comments or questions, please write them below. If you have any feedback or information you'd like to share with anyone else about this plant or the other plants I've mentioned in this video, or any questions about anything you can see behind me, there are a few different things around here, then you're welcome to write those below. So all I have to say now is thank you very much once again for watching Gardens and Crystals with me, Wesley Peterson. Please remember to like, subscribe and hit the bell so you know when my next video will be coming up, and I will see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.